Listen.
Posłuchaj.
Écoute.
聞いてください。
Escucha. MCO.
Listen.
MCO.
MCO.
Between the Bars.
Hi, I'm Yannick Dondelanger, and this is Between the Bars, the podcast of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. We're on part 2 of Stage Fright, a very open, frank conversation exploring the fear of stepping on stage and performing, night after night to thousands of people round the world, decade after decade, for an entire career. And you're listening to Chorale Quartet by composer Jörg Wiedmann, performed by the Mahler Chamber Orchestra at the 2024 Ojai Festival in California. Jörg Wiedmann describes the piece as the feeling of being in a very quiet, very dark, very uncomfortable place that you cannot escape from. And it's kind of appropriate for this episode, as it sums up, for me, a performer, the moment on stage, the silence in the seconds before the music starts, when you maybe begin to doubt yourself, and a creeping feeling runs up your spine. A feeling that you are indeed trapped, not in the dark, in broad stage light, in front of thousands of people. In episode 1 of Stage Fright, MCO musicians Ben, Justin, Joel, Johannes and Michiel were brave enough to open up about the effects of stage fright, mentally, physically, socially, and also to trace their own feelings of fear back into the fragile years of childhood, to some very personal traumas, born out of sometimes well-meaning but ultimately misguided educators, but other times coming from the pure bloody-mindedness of some of their own relatives. It's amazing what you can get away with and sweep under the carpet when you're young, got talent, and a burning desire to succeed big at the thing you love most. But fear, the Grim Reaper, will stalk you, and maybe years later come back to bite you when you least expect it. Prepare to hear about some truly cringeworthy moments from the celebrated careers of members of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. You might even remember having been in the audience for some of them. And then we talk about drugs. Beta blockers. But first, here's Michiel with his worst stage fright moment.
It was actually this slow movement of the Mozart clarinet concerto. It was in the Lingotto in Turin with Sabine Meyer. And I was sitting next to an amazing violin player who's now in the Berlin Phil. Anyway, in this slow movement, I really couldn't play anymore. But I had to stop playing. I couldn't even fake that I was playing. I really had to stop. So I got up and I walked off stage.
I remember. I remember that.
You remember that?
I remember it. I was there.
And here's to all our listeners. You can imagine everybody around me now is laughing. And that's exactly what's the problem. No, you can cut that out. No, because you walk off stage, you feel like the worst in the world, and then everybody starts laughing. So you feel so small.
Nobody laughed.
No. Now we can laugh about it. It's more than 20 years ago. But I walked off stage, and I was backstage, and then you hear the orchestra playing on stage, and you're walking around between all these empty cases there with all the violins taking out. And you go to the toilet for, I don't know why, just, to do something. You drink a lot of water. And at some point you have to tell yourself, right, I'm going back now. Because you can't just, leave the whole concert. It was just the first piece we were playing. So I did. So for the last movement, actually, of that clarinet concert, it was in slow movement. And when the slow movement was finished, I just opened the door and I just went back inside. Wow. And I thought, this is my how do you say?
Moment.
This is my moment. I'm going to win this. And I did. And then the last movement came, and the last movement was very joyful and easy. And the guy next to me really smiled at me, and he gave me a really nice look. And it was actually completely gone. Because the thing is, when you've been down so deep, and when you've been, then anything happens after that is just such a relief that you can finally. So then the tension is gone in a second, and then you just play, because it can't be worse than it was anyway. Because, it's been so bad that anything after that is actually great.
Anyone else, the worst moment?
Oh, I had a nice little moment a few years ago when I really needed to kind of jump into a colleague of mine in Hamburg just had a shoulder problem, and he was going to play this duo from Sofia Gubaidulina, which was just long notes. And like as slow as possible, and I think it was a duo with a young saxophone soloist. Actually, it was supposed to be easy. It wasn't really that hard, and we rehearsed it. And I thought, yeah, it's okay. But I could feel that voice in the back of my head being like, "Oh, dude, you know what's gonna happen." And so, basically, like we rehearsed fine. It wasn't a complicated piece. It was literally only held notes. And then we walked out there, and I could feel my heart rate rising and sort of the blood pressure, and feel it in my neck. And then just to start out, I just couldn't get the bow on the string, and it was just like whoa, 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 and I had real shakes. And at that point, because of the way that hall is, and we were just standing on the edge of the stage, and the audience is so close to you there, I really heard people talking about me. No joke. No joke. I heard, it was so soft, and I heard these comments coming from the audience. And at some point, it was just, I just felt such an overwhelming shame. But the strange part was, as soon as it was clear that some people were talking loudly, real loudly, about me, and I could hear it, boom, it went away. It was just like, wow, it was just gone. And then, but what happened then was the shame feeling. And so then it was just, I just played the whole thing, no problem, but just with this overwhelming sense of shame. And it was because I could tell people had heard, people had witnessed, what I was going through. So in a sense, it was really an interesting thing to go back and analyze, because it was like, if I had had these symptoms but had been able to bury them, then they probably would have just kept going on. But then, like, because there was loud talking and loud comments, wow, it really snapped out of it. So that was also, I just wanted to throw that out there, because I was like, I've also had a theory that sometimes we all have a wish to be seen, even though in these moments we don't want to be seen. There's also maybe this like inner wish to like have other people really see us and witness what we're going through.
Is it maybe, and we're going to get on to this in the next question of dealing with it, but is it maybe also for me in those situations, once it's happened, once you've realized you've made that idiot of yourself, then you get this relief, this tension, this release, and then you can just go on and do the thing, even if you're still in the same situation. Right. It's like, okay, I messed up. Everyone knows about it now. Let's just get on and do the job, kind of thing.
I remember once when I had this stress of performing, I was thinking, I can't play and everything. Then I realized, listen, okay, I want to do this the rest of my life. I can't go on stage, do my job, and just feel scared or frightened every time. That's not going to be a nice life. So I made a mental decision, okay, I have to enjoy this. I have to enjoy the music, I have to go for music, and not be scared of messing up. And that was a real break point for me, actually, when I made that decision, because I really made a clear decision myself. do I want to do this live? I have to enjoy it.
What was happening at that moment?
Well,
What made you have to?
Well, because that was during the time when we often play with Abado, and having the position I had, leader of second violins, playing with Abado, if you made anything that made you play tiny bit earlier than the concertmaster, you got the eyes. No? And he just looked at you like, what the idiot, what are you doing? Like this. And it made me really freaked out. I got really, like this. And then the same time I had these problems with the triplets I was speaking about before. Every time we had some difficult triplets, I thought, okay, I can't do this. I'm not capable of playing triplets. But then I thought, why should a person like that decide my life? I mean, he's great, he's an amazing conductor, but why should he decide if I should be really scared of playing? I mean, he didn't do that on purpose, but that's the way I felt. So I then made a mental decision. I'm just going to enjoy playing with him. I'm just going to enjoy playing music. And it worked so well. Since then, I at least think I became a better player because I decided just to enjoy the music, focus on the music, leave the technical details because that's what you work on at home. But when you perform, it's music only, and it normally works then.
How have you all dealt with your own journeys with stage fright? I know for some people it's about building routines. For others it's therapy. For others it's maybe building on knowledge of their instrument and how to feel comfortable with it. That was my case. Some people just need a banana and a quiet room before a concert to feel centered. Some people need to see what they do as not so important in the context of life. You mentioned that to me, Hannes. I'm sure you all have your own systems. Who wants to talk about their system or their journey or how they developed their system?
I had a system how to deal with before, but for me it works better not to have a system. Because if I have a system, I get locked up into that I have to do this and this, otherwise it will not work. It will be a complete OCD thing. So for me, it's much better not to have a system and take every day as it comes, as long as, of course, you should feel well. But not to go into a routine of having to that and that and that. Otherwise it will not work. I had that when I was younger. But I do everything I can now not to have that. Because I felt that was negative for me.
Okay. I want to ask Joel, I want to ask you about this because it seems like in this conversation, also sometimes in conversations we've had previously, even though I see you as an extremely centered and calm player, that you say you haven't dealt with your demons or your stage fright yet. And you strike me as a person who has absolutely dealt with it. Where are you at on that?
In some ways, I think I have dealt with it because I think, it's not a one-way street. It's an up and down, type roller coaster thing throughout your career. I think you have good times and bad times, and I've had both. But what is it? I think I've realised that I need to prepare well, and that preparing well gives me confidence. Yeah. And what I need is confidence. I just need to be really confident when I sit in a rehearsal or a concert that I can do it, And I just try and do that now by just being prepared and doing the work, That's helped me a lot. And I think I do try, and I think there's a part of me that I sort of play the role of someone who's confident, I sort of, that's part of my process, I guess, sort of not showing my fear, not showing the fear, I hide the fear. So so that's part of dealing with it in a way. I just don't want to be thought of as a kind of fragile or weak. So try and come across as someone who's confident. And actually that helps me weirdly.
I totally agree with Joel that a good preparation for the concert and feeling in control over the music you have to play because you practice it well and you rehearse it well with each other, that's already most of the work. But what also helps, I must say, and that's especially in your childhood, which I missed a little bit, is, and also later in the orchestras, is compliments from people. So like a positive approach. And there have been some people in my life who have added to my stage fright, to be honest. It's not only from me, from my own body, it's not coming out only, but it also came to me. So like, for example, my first violin teacher, she was very, very strict because her son was the best player. And he always, on the music evenings performances, he always played last. But I was second last because I was also good. And then she would say in the break to all the audience, she would say, and now we get the really good players. And then I was like 10 years old, And I was many times crying at home before I had to go there and play. But I must admit that Claudio Abbado also added a lot to people's stage fright, not especially my own. Every time you did anything wrong, you were either out of the orchestra or you were placed in the back. Or he was very strict on that, and that doesn't add to your comfort. It doesn't add to your control. So even when you can play the music, you can just get nervous because somebody else is expecting something you can't really grasp. You're just not in his world. So that makes you really uncomfortable and insecure, and that adds for me a lot to stage fright as well.
Classical music industry and also the classical music education is traditionally very conservative. Do you think our institutions, our education institutions, our orchestras, our conductors, do they breed fear? Do they breed musicians who are trained and grew up with fear? My experiences of places like Guildhall, a lot of my experiences were that fear was being bred into me.
I think it gets better and better, though. Right. I think it's way worse before. I think this old-fashioned way of conducting, for example, was very much a dictatorship almost. They could decide everything, and they could create fear. You had to perform. If you didn't manage, you were bad. I think young conductors generally and teachers are more positively embracing your qualities and trying to promote you by being positive. Still, by understanding that you have to play your best. You can't just fake it. You have to be prepared and do your best. But when it's a concert, I think it doesn't really help to be negative. And I do think that young conductors nowadays are much better in that way. To normally we do it together. Right. And I also think orchestras are better on that nowadays. I think colleagues often want to help each other instead of just checking, do you manage this? They actually are supportive to each other, I think. I feel I am trying to be that, and I think most people are that. I feel that. Yeah.
At this point in our lives, even if we still have stage fright, we must have dealt with it. We must be successful because we play on the biggest classical stages in the world. So does anyone have any insights into what worked for them?
The main thing I would say is that there is a basic level that I know I can perform to. And the basic level I know I can perform to is probably to an audience, they probably think that's great. But to me, I think, wow, it's really frustrating. Because at my very worst, I feel like I can't really do what I want to do. I don't have the freedom to do what I want to do. I might have the technique or I might have the ideas, but I don't have the actual physical freedom, in that moment to do them. Michiel talked about his story about actually running off stage. I mean, I've had that feeling like I wanted to run off stage so many times. The thought never just occurred to me that I actually could. And I mean, that's amazing. And I have so much sympathy with that feeling that I've been there so many times. I've just been thinking about it. They were like, why on earth am I sat here feeling like this? I could just leave and just leave. And
no one will die.
No one will die. Yeah. And interesting you'll say no one will die, because this might be a tangent. When I got my private pilot's license when I came, and it was during the pandemic, so I wasn't really playing much at the time. When I came back to performing full time, there was a slight change in my, let's just say, mindset, because for the previous 6 months to a year, all I'd really been doing was flying or learning to fly, and at the very early stage, learning not to die. Because, you're in a little aeroplane up in the sky on your own, which is,
Scary.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't find it scary, but I think I appreciate a lot of people find it scary. And there is a certain danger factor to that. When you get back on stage and you play, there is a certain freedom, I find now, in going, well, at the very worst, I'm not going to kill anyone.
And so to the final topic in our Stage Fright chat. It's the giant elephant in the room. The thing musicians, performers, conductors and soloists never ever open up about, at least not that I'm aware of. Beta blockers. Beta blockers are a drug prescribed by doctors, more usually to people who have high blood pressure. And a quick Google definition describes the drug as a medicine that by blocking the hormone epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, causes the heart to beat slower and with less force, consequently lowering blood pressure. Now, in the world of performing arts, for purposes of giving press conferences, academic speeches, and in fact any work that includes regularly presenting to large groups of people, beta blockers are used by some to handle the stress of the situation. And if you troll through the internet, you will find plenty of robust chat and discussion about the validity and, ironically, anxiety around the use of beta blockers. Also in other high-stress jobs, from pilots to surgeons to teachers to train drivers. Which means these drugs must somehow be in circulation in high-pressure vocations and careers. To help open the conversation on what I predicted would be a controversial topic, I played what I thought was a rather witty and positive video clip from a chat show where the celebrated actor Robert Downey Jr. opens up about his use of beta blockers for anxiety. Here's a clip from the interview, followed by our conversation.
Congratulations, by the way, on the Golden Globe on Sunday night. You mentioned it in your speech. As soon as I heard it, I wanted to ask you about it because you said I took a beta blocker before I came up here.
Yes, direct quote was, I just dropped a beta blocker, so this will be a breeze. They're fun. They're good once in a while. You can't depend on them.
Is that true? Tell me about them, because I took one time and I didn't feel like it did anything.
Right. Well, that's why it's actually okay to take it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it does something, but you don't go like, oh my God, I'd like to take 300 of those. It just kind of takes the edge off, and it worked a treat.
Is it good to take the edge off?
I think if you feel like you might panic if your name gets called, you know what it's like when you're nominated for a Golden Globe? You guys can relate to this, right?
I find it so weird. Who cares that he takes a bit? Why is it even in the news?
Yeah, but actually, that's a very interesting point you bring up, because I think that brings up the whole issue that obviously a lot of people, whether it's public speaking or performing, they take beta blockers in secret. Doctors know that they take them because you have to have a doctor to prescribe a beta blocker. And doctors keep statistics, so doctors know how many people are taking beta blockers for what reason. So they know how many people are taking it for performing. When I get beta blockers from my doctor prescribed, it says on the side of the packet to be taken 1 hour before performance. So it's very specifically for me. So I find it very interesting that, of course, and this is the interesting part of this conversation, nobody openly talks about it, but many, many people obviously take it, which is why I found it interesting, particularly that, of course, a well-known person like Robert Downey Jr. comes out and says it. Okay, let's open the conversation.
Yeah, I find it incredibly interesting why it's such a taboo subject. Like, as we just heard, being able to play an instrument of any kind, there's no way that you can improve your performance on that instrument by taking some kind of drug. So it's never going to enhance your performance. Like in sport, there there are drugs that obviously do. A cyclist or someone that needs to boost their strength or their oxygen intake or whatever it might be to increase speed, power. That's a whole different story. But playing an instrument, we've all practiced hours and hours and hours to get to the level we're at. There's no drug in the world that you can take which will make you play better. So that's not a kind of performance enhancing thing. It's just it's a way of being able to play. For me, taking a beta blocker is just a way of being able to play the way you want to play. I mean, I've taken them on and off through my career. When I was younger, more, and there are side effects. That it does make you a bit sluggish, and it does there are sort of negative. It's not. I just find it really interesting why it's such a taboo subject, and why people don't want to talk about it, and why people hide it. I mean, why not just? It's like a paracetamol for pain relief, or why not just just take the goddamn thing if it's going to keep you calm and be able to do your job. What's the problem? Really, what's the problem?
No, for me, being a diabetic type 1, I never want to take a beta blocker because I'm not sure how I would react, and because I never took one, and I think any drug that I don't know how I react to, I will never take. I would decided never to even try them, because if I would take a beta blocker and I would find it great for me, I don't know when I wouldn't take it anymore. Maybe I would in the end take it for every rehearsal, so I never want to start. So that's, I don't want it to feel that it makes me better. I heard often the side effects of beta blockers can make you actually also musically not as on the top as if you're normal nervous, because you kill your emotions a bit. What I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that you maybe are not as aware also musically, because everything is a bit. So that's another reason why I personally I don't like them, even though I understand many people take them. I believe it's better to find other ways. Many people also drink alcohol before concerts and stuff to calm you down. I think it's better to try work on yourself mentally try anyway. That's my idea, because I do believe that if you start taking a drug, that you become dependent on it, and you feel you have to take it every time. And then the day you don't have it, you might completely freak out. Yeah, that's my belief.
I think that for some people they really work. And I think they have, whether it's the physical effects of the drug or it's even the placebo effect, it has an effect. For me, I found that I didn't start taking them until I was probably 2 or 3 years out of college, and I was really freelancing and working all the time, and I was starting to struggle with various bits. I was starting to get really, really shaky. Sometimes around playing solos or things like that. So someone suggested, hey, why don't you just try one in a rehearsal to see what you think? And it worked, and I felt fine. I felt really normal. I could do it. I could play this solo. It was no problem. So then occasionally I would take one. But then it got to the stage where it started to be a bit of a reliance thing. I would sit at the back of a section and just play a normal concert, and I couldn't get through the concert if I hadn't had one. And what I tended to find was that actually it wasn't taking anything off. I still was physically tight. I was still having the feelings of actually feeling really uncomfortable. I might very well have had a lower heart rate, but it didn't really have the greatest effect.
It doesn't have a mental effect, it just has a physical effect.
Yeah.
It won't take away your anxiety.
No. So really, so I stopped, and I sort of, the doctor suggested maybe it wasn't the best idea. And actually, I've not taken them for years. And Johannes just mentioned about the numbing what was it you said? Emotional side. I mean, I always find this phrase, you get nervous because you care. I find that so irritating when people say that. Because, I mean, of course, it's really well meant. And it's, it's true. But I think you get nervous way more. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think just saying, you get nervous, you just care so much, because it's great to care. And I always think, yeah, it's great to care, but, perhaps I care too much that, and it's getting in the way. I would never judge anyone for taking beta blockers. I mean, I've taken some myself, but there remains a massive taboo about it. It's almost an unspoken thing. I think there's a history of hiding things, of brushing things under the carpet, and you can just get out there and do that. And maybe that's in different countries. Maybe there's a different tradition. Personally, I think in the UK there's quite a big tradition of it being quite taboo. It's just something you don't really talk about. It's something you deal with yourself. I think it's great that we sit here and talk about it, because, that I think that's quite rare. Whether you take one or not, I think you have to be able to stand there or sit there on stage and physically do the stuff that you need to do. You have a technique, you have an understanding, you have a craft. I think this idea of taking a beta blocker I think it's personal. And I think whatever stage of, fine, okay, if it's heart rate, something like that, fine. But really, I don't think that, for me, it made a big difference.
So I just wanted to say, do you think it's a sort of macho thing? Is it a kind of, is the reason it's taboo, is it considered like a weakness, or is it some kind of, you should be able to, it's like a sort of strength, you're considered weak or fragile or vulnerable, and that's not, being a performer, one should be able to deal with these things. I don't know. I'm just, because it is interesting. Why is it taboo? Why do people hide it? Why do people not talk about it? I've taken them. You've taken them. You've taken them. We're happy to talk about it. Why is it such a kind of strangely secret world out there?
Some spontaneous thoughts about that the whole classical music and the history of being a musician, traditionally it's a very mystical profession. It's a very nebulous profession, being either a soloist or a conductor, and the audience shouldn't come close to you, and you're almost like a magician, and your craft shouldn't be so scientifically, planned out. I mean, that's changing now. The whole profession is changing, and maybe taking a beta blocker is something way too concrete and ordinary. How dare you be human and weak and need this? You're supposed to be a musician. I don't have that talent. You have that talent. You produce on the stage something I can't. I don't want to know that you have a weakness. I don't know if that's a connection.
Well, you're afraid maybe also to be rejected.
Yeah.
Can I add something to the subject of taking beta blockers? Because we were talking about stage fright in the beginning, and for me they go together, but not completely. Because I can be, for example, I could take a beta blocker when I'm really nervous for a concert beforehand. So I think it's going to be really exciting and I'm nervous. But actually the real stage fright has to do with a fixation, for me, fixation on certain parts in your score where you're afraid that you might lose control of your bow. That's generally my feeling. And I must admit that a beta blocker doesn't change that. The thing is, the beta blocker makes you generally maybe more relaxed and everything. You go on stage and it's all fine. But still, I could have, even with the beta blocker, I could have a shaking bow arm and a bouncing bow. Because my doctor once told me, Michiel, I can give you some beta blockers, but they're only 10 milligrams. And I give them to heart patients and they are 80 or 90 or 100 milligrams. So don't think you will feel anything. But if you want to take this, you know, how do you call it? The kind of fake medicine? Placebo, then please help yourself, because if it's just for your head, you know, please do it, because it's harmless. But for me, it doesn't solve the problem of serious stage fright. I mean, like freaking out on stage, that you can only solve in your head, I think.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify a bit? Maybe, Ben, if you misunderstood me when I meant when you get nervous, I never meant to say that you get nervous because you care. I think you get nervous, whatever. But I think when you are a bit nervous, I do believe that you are more receptive for colors and music. And I think that I strongly believe. But I don't think you become nervous because you care.
Well, certainly on a medical level, you're right that the whole fight or flight system in your body is designed to make you more receptive and aware. I mean, I feel myself often as an interesting experiment, because I think I've been taking beta blockers, I don't know, 15 years or something. And I got to the stage where I would take them very regularly, so regularly that on more than one, on a number of occasions, I would actually forget to take them. You know, we all forget routines occasionally, whether it's brushing your teeth, whatever it is. And I would forget to take them. And then sometimes I would realize in the middle of the concert, sometimes I would realize afterwards. And it's interesting to analyze that after the concert, I would realize, I didn't take one. Now, then my next thought would be, what was different? And actually nothing was different, which brings us to the subject of it being a placebo. And I strongly believe, in my case anyway, I think it's also right to say it's different for different people. I take a 10 milligram dose, which is a very small dose. And I think, in effect, my beta blocker is a placebo. I don't actually think it's doing anything. I think it's like somebody takes a banana, someone has to have a sandwich, someone has to do something, a routine before. And this has become, for whatever reason, a routine that I do. When it's not there and I don't know it's not there, it actually doesn't make any difference. So in that respect, it's purely in my mind, which is very interesting.
Can I ask one question to that, Yannick?
Yeah.
But you say sometimes I forgot, and then but if you would realize 5 minutes before you would go on stage.
Well, that's also interesting, because in the beginning, when I would, in the early years, I would occasionally forget, and then I would realize in that scenario 5 minutes before, then I would be, my God, I have to go and find one. Or halfway through the concert, my first thing would be, just like you, when is the next very quiet long note coming along? I mean, it's insane, it's ridiculous. But then as the years go on, and obviously you play, you realize, or you're able to play in the way, as you said, Joel, the way that you want to play. It's sort of, you've retrained yourself that I can just play exactly the way I'm playing in a practice room. I don't have any extraneous thing in my mind holding me back. Then when you forget to take a beta blocker, you do realize it's just everything is a mental condition. It's all a question of in the mind. And of course, as this short clip we saw on the video, the doctor there says it's always better if you don't have to take a drug. That's very true. But it's also interesting if it's a placebo, which implies that eventually you might not need it. You can eventually do away with it, because it is in the mind.
So up to now, this podcast has been very, amenable, and we've all been like agreeing with each other and nodding our heads and, oh, yeah. But actually, I'm about to strongly disagree with what Johannes said a minute ago, which is, that you think being nervous is an essential part of being a musician, and that, like when you're performing and playing in a kind of natural nervous state, that you're more emotionally connected to the music, and that you can find colors, and that you can kind of do things that you wouldn't be able to do after taking a beta blocker, for example. But when I have taken them in the past, I found, the reason I took them in the first place was because I was doing concerts or auditions or performances where I literally couldn't do those things because I was blocked by this physical thing that happened, which meant that I couldn't do all those things, those musical, aware, being emotionally connected. You know, I was just kind of gripped by this fear and this kind of horrible feeling, which meant I became this sterile, you know, trying to survive person playing this instrument, trying not to sound horrible, but not thinking at all about in any music sense. So actually, I found that when I took them, I didn't have to worry about that anymore, and that I suddenly could do all those things, like those musical things, and those having that great feeling of enjoyment and sharing and connecting and feeling. And so it kind of, in a way, did the opposite of what you were saying for me, you know.
Do you think there's a difference between nervous excitement and pure nerves? For me personally, I just find it very interesting that I sometimes forget to take it. And afterwards I think, wow, I didn't even notice that. For me, ironically, that's a very positive thing. And it also means that the drug I am taking is not taking away from my pleasure of my performance.
It's more, but don't you think it's more of like it gets right down to like the roots of the human psyche? I mean, I read a very long article in the New York Times a few years ago about Russian pianist Sviatoslav Richter. Right. So I didn't know this until I read that article. Maybe you guys know this, but I had grown up listening to CDs of this guy just because my dad had all his CDs. I remember being at music camp when he died, and I was like, oh, he died. No, but you know, obviously, like just a legendary musician, and had this. I think it was a lobster, like a toy lobster. Have you guys heard this story? No. Oh yeah, great. So if I'm not mistaken, the article was like detailing his real obsession, with having this sort of lucky toy lobster in a box with him, as far as I understand, even on stage when he played. And it wasn't like something he would show. It was in a box. He couldn't see it, but he'd have it like under his arm or something. And people would assume it's like, I don't know, part of the stuff he needs to play or whatever. And then he would put it down and play. Well, this is how I understood it. Who knows? It might have been like backstage, so don't quote me on all the details, but I know there was an OCD, a real obsession there, like that then, you know, well after his death was like documented in this famous newspaper. It was a fascinating article because at some point then he also, like Johannes mentioned, he also wanted to be free. That was his ritual. He needed it. He wanted to be free. And I'm a guy who really needs my rituals too. Like, and I also second the thought of like maybe becoming free from some of these rituals, because I have stuff I have to do before the concert, you know, and I have weird stuff I do, like because I do like learned. I always go to the bathroom and do my tapping routine. There's like a self-talk. Yeah, you guys have never noticed me doing this? Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, but I hide it, of course. Well, you know, because like, but it's psychological self-talk with acupressure that a doctor in Germany. Acupressure. Yeah, it's like tapping slowly on these nerve endings. They're all over. Like before every concert? Before every concert. Could you give just a quick demonstration? Yeah, but I mean, like German students would know this, but so I mean, so you have to like So also slightly embarrassing. No, but so there's sentences that this doctor also like developed. Dr. Klinghardt, I think he's from Stuttgart. And then it was like, even though I'm nervous about my bow shaking, I love and accept myself the way I am right now. But you have to go in a slow 3, and it's actually good if you look in the mirror, but you have to like, so the nerves, it's Chinese, based on Chinese medicine, the nerve endings are just right in the middle of the skull. So you've got to like, you put your hands like in a row, and then you tap right in the middle of the skull. You can feel where the nerve endings, and you tap a slow 3 rhythm. Well, I mean, I do have to admit that I feel like it's maybe just my thing, that I should just like, it's my thing I need to do. I should just do it like in my corner, you know. I've gotten a little bit more open about it recently, in recent years. I was very secretive about it, like, you know, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I've gotten a little bit more relaxed about it, but definitely it's just part of my ritual, you know. But I bring up the Sviatoslav Richter story because then he wanted to free himself from his obsessive toy lobster thing, and then actually had an assistant. According to the story, this is how I understood it, he had an assistant who would then, without his knowing, and he told his assistant, please take the box with the lobster, go to my dressing room, I'm going to stand here in the hallway. You either take the lobster out or don't, and I don't know it, and you give me the box and I go out. And that was his way of trying to free himself from this absolute obsession. And it's so interesting, that story, and I think about that a lot because, like you said, the placebo effect is so real. And he was obviously like a dude who was falling into this trap of slightly obsessive compulsive disorder. And I can feel it, you know, like I would not want to go out without having done my little weirdo ritual, you know. If I had to, okay, I would somehow live through it. But I'm sure every little thing that would happen, I would be like, oh, you know, that's it, you know, like world's ending. Like this is why it's bad concert, you know. It's like, I know I'm gonna shake. This is it, you know. And maybe that would also be a good feeling to just be like, oh well, I mean, how can this be good? Like I didn't do my thing, you know. But yeah, so yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that.
It's famously said to take a minimum of 10,000 hours to master an instrument. And if you're talking about the performers who I've been speaking to in this episode, by this stage in their careers, they've perfected their craft over a lot longer than 10,000 hours. Is it possible to imagine how much repetition correction, repetition adjustment, repetition evaluation, repetition has gone into learning how to produce, on demand, music from the mind through the body and then the instrument, finally out into the concert hall. And by the way, effortlessly, seemingly spontaneously. Oh, and without breaking the audience's suspension of reality. Think about this. What if that little voice of doubt starts creeping into your consciousness just as you're about to perform? I'm not trying to dramatize the point. This is often how the story goes for even the most seasoned of performers. We just don't talk about it. For me, stage fright is proof of both how powerful and fragile the mind is. Able to reproduce intricacies that are fantastic, only to sabotage them with a moment's doubt. And if it's true that a lot of doubts and fear are bred from childhood, then can you imagine how many hours these negative behavioral patterns have had to breed and fester and develop in the mind? Thousands. As many as it takes to learn to play the instrument. It's this irony, the years I wasted in private worrying about stage fright, when I should have been exploring and developing my musical personality on stage, that convinces me whichever routine will allow you to stay clear-headed and as in control of your actions on stage as when you're practicing, whether it's eating a banana, doing a head-tapping routine, taking a toy lobster on stage, embracing your fear and putting the enjoyment first, or arranging with your doctor to take a tablet. Then you'll be able to start practicing how to perform while you're performing. And instead of being in fight or flight mode, you will be in exploration mode. And that has to be a more fun and nourishing way to perform over your whole career. Personally, I'm not sure much good ever happens when humans are in a state of fright. Here are some closing thoughts and reflections from my friends. I hope they're useful.
Try and find a way physically, whether that be posture or, just, keeping yourself in shape. Find a way just to set yourself up as best as you can, that you don't need to rely on anything else to get through it. You are going to feel uncomfortable at times. It is not a normal activity to walk out on stage and play to thousands of people. If that was a normal activity, then, well, it's just not a normal activity. So I think just accept it's not a normal activity and really just embrace it.
I actually think young people are lucky these days because we're living in a different world now where mental health is right on the forefront of everyone's minds, and it's being talked about a lot, and people are always being encouraged to talk freely about it. And I think there's a lot more help out there, a lot more support, a lot more awareness, and support that they need that maybe we didn't actually, because it has been a sort of taboo subject for so many years, and now it's not.
What we talked about before is the kind of conservative, kind of negative style education, or very strict, or how do you say, compared to a very positive approach from teachers, although still very structured and very good level, of course, but in a much more personal way and a much more careful way, I guess.
Be strict with yourself when you practice. That's necessary. You have to be strict when you practice. You want to nail every note. You want to practice all the difficult passages. But then when you perform, you have to let it go. Then it's only music that counts.
As I've gotten older, the one thing I regret from my education was that I wasn't gracious with myself, and that I also didn't use the chance to experiment. But I mean, it's so much more fun if you can learn to forgive yourself and just kind of treat it like a big fun experiment. When you go out there and dare to kind of make a gesture and open yourself up, can be really fun, actually. It's scary, but it's also really fun. I think that's why we keep doing it. And so then there's this aspect of like, well, if you don't really, if you're on a roller coaster and you don't know what's coming, you can embrace it or not, but you're probably gonna be taken to the end anyway, and you're gonna yell your head off, and it's gonna be crazy and fun, and hopefully you won't puke, but even if you do, that was great, like, and so there's this mentality, like, of like, oh, if you can't really do it, you shouldn't go out there. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, take a risk, and maybe I should also remember that more too. Like, take a risk, forgive yourself when it doesn't go go well, and just experiment and treat it like a big fun experiment, because that's what it is, you know.
I think it's very important to make clear to everyone listening that the opinions you've heard in this episode concerning the use of beta blockers are not that of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra organisation. They are opinions of only myself and those I interviewed for this episode. We are primarily musicians and have no formal medical training, which means if you are considering using beta blockers, you should first consult the website of your national medical authority and make an appointment with your doctor to get a proper medical consultation.
Between the Bars would like to say a huge thank you to Joel Hunter, Michiel Commandeer, Ben Newton, Justin Corley, and Johannes Lerstad for talking about their Stage Fright. All music you heard was performed by the Mahler Chamber Orchestra at the 2024 Ojai Music Festival, California. And we are so grateful to the festival for allowing the use of these TV broadcasts, which are still on the Ojai Music Festival website. So click on it and you can watch us all in concert. The Between the Bars team is Benita Schauer, Matthias Meyer, and me, Yannick Dondelanger, and it's a production of the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. Till next time, don't forget, keep listening.
Between the Bars.